Canada Nickel is advancing the Crawford Nickel discovery. It's the largest nickel sulfide discovery since the early 1970s. We're advancing this project in a time frame where the market is desperately short of nickel, particularly outside of Indonesia, for a whole new burgeoning use for electric vehicles. In terms of some of the key things that makes this project really work, one, we're located in Timmins, which is a excellent established mining district. We have all the major infrastructure in place that you'd need to build a large-scale open pit operation. We just completed a $50 million financing at the beginning of March, which keeps us funded well through into early next year. And by the end of this year, we expect to have a resource update completed shortly and a feasibility study updated by Q4. So we'll be ready to have this project into production by the later part of this decade. What was even more exciting was a year ago, we realized that we had another 13 targets in the region, and we think we're unlocking an entire nickel district, and this will join the ranks of the most significant nickel districts going forward. So I'll just quickly run through the story in some more detail. In terms of the nickel market, we basically need to double supply by 2030 versus where we were in 2020. Most analysts are underestimating this amount, and the most important thing is this nickel needs to come from somewhere else other than China, Chinese-controlled parts of Indonesia, and Russia. And we all saw what would happen with the LME earlier in the year when Russia invaded Ukraine and took basically 20% of the million tons of nickel that isn't controlled by China and put a big question mark around its availability. So where we are, just north of Timmins, literally sitting next to a highway, you have all the major infrastructure in place, rail, low carbon electricity, and 80,000 people who live within an hour's drive of the project site. So we'll actually have a workforce that can drive to and from the site and won't have to depend on fly-in, fly-out labor, which is inherently more expensive. We completed a PEA last May, and again, we made this discovery September 2019, so we're advancing it very, very rapidly, given our team's experience doing this in our past lives. PEA, very, very robust economics, and most importantly, setting up and checking a lot of the boxes that the majors would ultimately want to own a project of this scale. We are in the first quartile of the cash cost curve. We're in the lowest decile of the carbon curve. One of the great characteristics of this project is one, in Ontario, we have access to low carbon electricity. You can set projects up that operate at the scale to be able to use electric trolley trucks and electric rope shovels. So we can actually deliver a very low carbon footprint. And most exciting, these ultramafic nickel deposits, this class of deposits, ultramafic rock, when it's exposed to air, spontaneously absorbs CO2. So that number you see there doesn't include any of the benefit of our tailings and waste rock, which will spontaneously absorb CO2 and we believe will allow us to be a zero carbon producer of the various metals contained in the deposit. In terms of scale, we'd be the 5th largest nickel sulfide operation globally. And we would be the largest base metal operation in Canada. Over the last 24 months, Chile and Peru, which were formerly, quote, safe jurisdictions politically, have got a lot more challenging for mining. And so Canada looks relatively better than a lot of jurisdictions globally. And having a base metal asset of this scale would obviously be very attractive to the big boys. In terms of value add from the PEA to the feasibility study, again, because we're rapidly advancing this, most juniors, usually the PEA is the best number you see and it goes down from there. In our case, we've got a number of significant value adds that we're going to be including in the feasibility study that'll be ready at the end of the year. The PEA resource was 900 million tons. In a mine plan, we'll have 1.3 to 1.8 billion tons in the feasibility study. We've done a bunch more met work. We were targeting a 4 to 5 percentage point improvement. The test work that we've released to date has shown a 6 to 16% improvement. Each one of those percentage points is worth $90 million of NPV, so it gives you some sense of the scale of improvement we're looking at. We're doing work on larger and larger samples to understand what the carbon footprint, the real carbon capture can look like. And as well, in the feasibility study, we'll be selling about half the nickel into the EV market rather than stainless that is unable to pay for the cobalt PGMs. And so the cobalt and PGMs that are already sitting in the concentrate will become payable. In terms of the carbon capture, just to give you a visual image of just how spontaneous this process is, if you look at the picture on the right-hand side, the core on the top is what it looks like when it comes out of the ground, basically dark black to dark green. Within a year, any chunk of this rock that's been sitting out has a white coating over it. That white coating is a mineral called magnesite. It's a magnesium carbonate mineral, and it got there by that black rock basically reaching out into the atmosphere, grabbing a CO2 molecule, and spontaneously converting itself into magnesite. You know, in today's environment, that property is a very, very valuable property, and we think is going to make this class of deposits going to be the key source of nickel for the EV industry going forward. So what was even more exciting about getting Crawford going and realizing that it on its own was going to be a world-class discovery was the realization that we could use geophysics, which we used to target Crawford, to take a look at the broader district. In the district, we realized there was 20 targets. We already had 5 of them. We did 18 deals in the second half of last year to pick up 13 additional targets, and we're quite confident that another half dozen Crawfords are going to emerge, and we're going to highlight that exploration potential over the next few years. Some of these we've called uncoveries because after we identified the geophysical footprint, we went back into the government drilling records and again found intersections that weren't interesting in 1970, 1980, 2001, but in today's market, are the kind of nickel intersections that we're targeting for. To give you some idea visually of the scale of the targets we're looking for, and again, why we're quite excited by the district scale potential, Crawford, which is the image on the top there, those areas in pink, the resource update that's coming should be close to 2+ billion tons of resource in those pink areas. You can see the targets directly below it with Reed and Rayome are a multiple of the size of Crawford. Basically, our thesis is anything that is bright pink is a magnetic intensity that's consistent with serpentinized dunite, which is what we're looking for from a mineralization perspective. A week or two ago, we released our first holes from these specific targets, and Reed, we hit 350 meters of dunite from top to bottom and 84 meters of better than average mineralization. So we're quite excited by that. These aren't necessarily the best targets. These are the ones we currently have access to with exploration agreements. And this time of year in Timmins, it gets pretty soggy. We'll be looking to the other 9 targets that we haven't tested yet and be rolling that out over the rest of the year. If you look at nickel, the bulk of the world's supply comes from just a half a dozen regions. We think what we've put together here has the potential to be one of these new regions and join a pretty prestigious list of nickel districts. Again, the properties of this rock to spontaneously absorb CO2 and allow you to get to a net zero carbon nickel, we believe that these type of deposits are going to be a key source of nickel for the EV industry going forward. We've already seen a huge amount of corporate activity in the space. Most of the nickel sulfide assets that have been around for 10 or 15, or in some cases Kabanga 40 years, have attracted a significant amount of investment or been taken out in the last 3 years. And again, we expect that pace of activity to continue, particularly as nickel prices have now moved up several dollars a pound higher from when these deals were done. In terms of valuation, we've only been publicly trading for just over 2 years, so we've got a ways to catch up to our peers, and so there's still a significant amount of upside in our share price going forward. We have 7 analysts covering us, which again, for a company that's just over 2 years publicly traded, I think speaks to the quality of our team and the project. And as I said, we just raised money, so we're well funded into early next year. So we completed our financing. We actually filed the initial project description, which formally kicks off the permitting process, which we expect to have permits complete by 2025. We'll have a resource update coming out here by the end of June, feasibility study by the end of the year, and expect to have definitive agreements in place with all 3 local First Nations. So the project will be ready to advance into production as soon as the permits show up. So thank you for your time. And